Well, the recent report that Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter has thrown the gauntlet on the table, so to speak, by assuming and presenting that the United States will no longer seek a no usage of nuclear weapons first attitude, and has instead said that the United States will reserve the right to launch nuclear weapons without any hesitation and without any justification other than perceiving a threat, is one of the most remarkable and frightening declarations in the history of modern nations, because essentially what I see it doing is positioning the United States Pentagon, the Department of Defense, in a military gone rogue within the United States that is headed up by psychopaths in uniform that really are blood drunk with war for the past 15 years, setting them up for a long-term military conflict with Russia, Iran, and China. And this really, in one respect, could end democracy and civilization and peaceful existence between nations and transform us into a barbaric, animalist culture, because the military in the United States is now off the chain. It is not obeying President Obama. It is not obeying the United States Congress. Instead, you have a small cabal within the Pentagon, and specifically at U.S. Central Command at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida, where you have the brain trust that commands all of the United States operations in the Middle East, including all of the United coalition from various other countries, including the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all located at MacDill Air Force Base. You have one central U.S. Central Command body commanding the Middle East theater, positioning itself for long-term war. And President Obama needs to immediately take command of the presidency of the United States and very clearly demonstrate that it is not his policy to wage war. It is not his policy to start World War III. It is not his policy to start a nuclear exchange. And he should demonstrate authority as president by immediately terminating and firing Ashton Carter, Secretary of Defense, as well as commander of U.S. Central Command and the commander in theater, because this is a provocation to Russia, Iran, and China. This is a provocation saying we will use nuclear weapons similar to what we did in the strike against Syrian forces a week or so ago if we feel threatened. And it's particularly alarming given the positioning of the batteries of missile silos now in Romania and Poland, that the United States is complementing those missile silos with potential nuclear armaments. It's very plainly stating that the United States reserves the right to use a nuclear weapon if it so deems it appropriate. Now, the two senators who have introduced a legislation which forbids the President of the United States from using nuclear weapons without declaring war through the Congress, that's a very important piece of legislation to immediately pass, because it forces the country to recognize that the Congress of the United States is the political body that legislates war. It declares war, not the presidency, and certainly not generals or admirals who have a financial stake in war. So the Congress needs to immediately act by forbidding the presidency from using any nuclear weapon without Congress's approval of declaring war. Not a police action, not an intervention, not a humanitarian mission to Syria cloaked in conspiracy and gun and financing, but an actual declaration of war that the Congress, that the people of the United States make. And this is very important because the presidency has gone off the rails for the last 15 years, starting with the Bush administration, starting with the Patriot Act. They have completely gone unconstitutional and gone rogue and initiated military conflicts all over the world without the specific declaration of war that Congress and the founding fathers of the United States mandated. And that's why we're in the mess that we're in, because we've got a rogue president from George W. Bush who was a patsy and a puppet of Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, Donald Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, and a variety of others who had the agenda of expanding the Greater Israel Project into the Middle East and weakening all the other Muslim countries and regimes for that purpose. We've had the United States embark in 15 years of war. That this is a signature highlight that because the United States senses that it's losing its position in the Middle East, it's losing its reputation, it's being defamed and slammed as a warmongering nation. Now the United States is trying to inflate and escalate and more increasingly bully the rest of the world by declaring it will use nuclear weapons if it feels so. So I think there should be international outrage. I think there should be a coalition of countries that speak out against it, and it should be directly communicating to the American people, because the American people are largely ignorant of some of these secret operations that the military are doing. The American people are unaware that the American military and CIA and President Obama has been funding the ISIS, Wahhabi, Takfiri mercenaries which have been engaged in Syria. The American people are unaware that Swiss banks, as we declared in Shell Game, the book, Swiss banks have been financing through the bank accounts of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and other Middle Eastern nations. The American people are sorely ignorant of all these facts. So I'm hoping and praying that Donald Trump is the man who will rise and not only refuse to use nuclear weapons, but will actually assume a posture of working with Iran, working with China, working with Russia to solve a lot of these problems. And I think that is really his undermining solution, although sometimes he may say the opposite in this political season. I do think it's time for a leader to stand up and declare the United States will not use nuclear weapons in the interest of peace.